All right, guys, we're going to talk about non-classical homeopathy again. This time it's going to be Jan Scholten and his method of classifying remedies. I'm going to be bashing, of course, not his method because I am very critical of non-classical methods. So some of you might think that this is being too harsh on someone, but homeopathy is a science. So we need to be critical of methods, reform methods, which basically throw the basics of homeopathy out the window and then just you know go in a completely different direction. So this is going to be an interview with Jan Scholten, and let's get into it.
Welcome, Jan, to Toronto. Thank you for taking the time today to share of your life's work on this beautiful fall day.
Thank you.
You don't need much introduction, but you can tell us a little bit about your early years and under what circumstances you first encountered homeopathy.
It was after I finished my medical degree as a doctor, and I planned to become a general practitioner. But there was a waiting time before I could start, and then I thought, okay, I'll do some courses in vitamin and mineral therapy and acupuncture, and later also homeopathy. But I didn't know much about homeopathy. I thought it was a kind of herb therapy, and I didn't know really what was the depth of it. But when I studied it, then I was reading stories of people not only getting better with complaints, but also feeling better in general and feeling as they were for 20 years ago before the disease started. And that struck me. Then I was thinking, well, I've never heard that in normal medicine that can be, that happens.
Right.
And then I thought,
okay, that's a pretty standard discovery story, how he came to study homeopathy and he looked into it. People got better, etc.
is that true? I was skeptic at that moment too, because I was thinking, this is not normal medicine. When that's true, everyone should know it, because that's what you want to do as a doctor, that people feel healthy again, that they feel like they were before.
Right.
And that they have joy again and they feel happy, and that's what the stories were telling. Of course, there were not all the cases were like that, but there were stories like that. And that intrigued me, and I couldn't let it go down, so I had to study it.
Right, and what was your belief system at the time? Were you a strict scientific type of person or open to more spiritual endeavors?
For me, that's not a contradiction. For me, that's the same. A real scientist is open to everything. When you limit yourself as a scientist to experiences, then you're not a scientist. The scientist is always open to what's there.
Okay, so I actually agree with him on this point, and that is, he said it very well, right? A lot of scientists nowadays are not scientists because they have a belief system. And of course, the skeptics are going to be yelling right now that they don't have a belief system, but they do. They actually do. And when they see someone cured with homeopathy, they're just going to ignore that.
If it's spiritual or whatever, or material, it doesn't matter. So I didn't see myself as limited. So I think I'm always been a scientist.
Right. So what was the first thing about homeopathy that really intrigued you once you actually got into it?
That's that fact that you can really heal people. And that's what I'm always trying to do with every patient. Not only that the complaints go, but that they feel their old energy again,
Right.
and they feel happy, and they're not bothered by all kinds of circumstances. And that's what I want to achieve. And then the second thing is, of course, that the philosophy is quite beautiful, especially in the theoretical part, not in the materia medica part. You know, the description of the remedies is, from the scientific point of view, is awful. It's rubbish. It's a bunch of unrelated facts.
Yes. Again, I agree with him again. The remedy information is actually very dry and difficult to study. And this is actually what puts people off of studying homeopathy. So, his intention to make the remedy information not boring and therefore make more people study homeopathy is actually a good intention. So I commend him for having that intention. Now, it's a completely separate issue whether or not the method he devised to make the information interesting actually works. So that is another question. And if I think it doesn't, so I'm sorry to say that. So this is another person who's trying to make homeopathy interesting, just like someone who is just like the guy Sankara, who's trying to make to move homeopathy into psychoanalysis, which is more interesting. This guy is trying to make homeopathy more interesting. And again, as I said, this can be a good intention, but there can also be monetary motives behind it. You know, it can serve as serve the purpose of better marketing. It can serve the purpose of him being elevated to the status of the person who found the secret methodology, the best methodology, and now he is a famous figure within the professional circles of homeopathy.
So that's not beautiful. In science, something beautiful is also very simple. In that sense, the law of similars, like cures like, that's a very simple law, and that has a beauty in it.
Right.
I agree again with this. Wow, I agree so much with him. Yes, you need the best form of science, or the most beautiful form of science, is when you have simplicity. But sometimes you don't. There are branches of science which don't have beautiful simplicity. And one of those is the remedy information in homeopathy. Now, you can just accept that and move on, or you can claw your way to towards trying to change that using any means possible. But I don't think that's a good idea. Just accept that some parts of homeopathy are not beautiful, and that's it.
So that attracts me, but first of course it has to work, otherwise. But yeah, you can make a beautiful thought, but when it doesn't work in practice, it's not science. It's maybe art or whatever, but not science. So it has to work too.
Right. So you've become a pioneer in classification, right? The idea of classification, and it does date back right back to Hahnemann. But what made you start again after a long hiatus to think in those terms of classification? Right? There's Hahnemann, there's a little bit later on, but not much of any systematic thinking in this direction.
But there has always been. A lot of homeopaths forget that Hahnemann started the first classification with miasms, which is a classification in its own right. And also Kent, he describes combination remedies like kalium silicatum without approving. And also George Vitulkas was describing kaliums.
That is true, actually. So there exists the phenomenon of classification to a certain extent in homeopathy. But, Kent was a much smarter person than you and had a lifetime of study behind him. And he never took classification to the levels you did. So why is that? You're smarter than all the great masters of homeopathy combined, and you found the secret to doing homeopathy after the biggest geniuses of the golden age of humanity couldn't.
So it's not very uncommon in homeopathy at all, although it has never been done very systematically.
Right.
But from my point of view, classification is basic for science. Without classification, you cannot have science. Even our normal knowledge, our own language is classification. When we talk about a cow, it's a classification. Every word is a classification. So,
Yeah, classification is good. We established that. But sometimes it's not possible to classify everything. And that's just the way life is. And you didn't accept that. So you brute forced classification into homeopathy. And that's not good.
we cannot do without. Our whole materia medica is words, and they're all classifications. So the idea that we can do without classification and be completely empirical is nonsense. And that's an experience that also Einstein had. He said, epistemology without science becomes an empty scheme. So what he says, you can, when you only experience, but when you cannot classify it,
You don't have to defend classification. So this is a red herring. This is a non sequitur. This is, you don't need to defend classification. We all agree that classification is good. The only thing we disagree on is that you you take it to an extreme level and classify everything and disregard remedy information which doesn't fit into that.
you cannot give it a reference, then it's empty. You have nothing from the scientific point of view.
Right.
But for me, classification has been so normal that I was, in a way, surprised that people could be against it.
And the problem is that students of homeopathy are going to gravitate towards schools that teach this because it's much easier than memorizing unrelated symptoms. And so you can learn the classification in 10 minutes and start doing homeopathy, as opposed to making an extreme effort to absorb hundreds of pages of unrelated information over years. Now, of course, students are going to choose his method, but then again, if you could learn homeopathy in 10 minutes, don't you think Hahnemann and Kent would have come up with that method? Or what do you think? You can comment below this video and tell me what you think.
I knew at that time that I was thinking, what will the other homeopaths say about this? Because there was no proving.
Most homeopaths are going to love this. Some of us, like me, are very skeptical.
Really nothing. Only classification. But it has feeling I had to do it, I had to try it.
Now, your first seminal contribution was to apply the idea of classification in the highest systematic way to the entire periodic table.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you think about taking on such a more systematic project, and specifically how did you come up with the themes for the series and the stages?
Now, the themes of the series were already a little bit there. I compared first an Iron series, Fair and Ghana, and had a similar kind of quality of duty and work and kindness that too. And the Gold series, there was kind of heaviness and responsibility. So gradually it became more and more clear that there was a basic theme in each row.
Right.
In the beginning, I skipped the upper rows like Carbon series and Silicon series because they were too vague. But then I thought, okay, but when the lower rows have a theme, then the upper must have that too.
Okay.
So I started searching for what that could be.
It's all very vague. It's not just that row. It's all very vague. The mental symptoms in homeopathy are already very subjective, vague, and difficult to use. So when you're making them even more abstract, it gets even more vague, and nobody's going to know what's going on. Like this row of remedies is duty bound. So so what? You need to be looking at okay, this is too basic, but you need to be looking at other symptoms too, not just mental symptoms. And it's crazy. This is crazy.
And comparing it, and then of course I had already an idea that carbon had something to do with the father, so I thought, okay, that maybe it's more to do with
Father? We don't have ancestral trauma information in homeopathy. We don't have that. Okay, so just forget about that.
the earlier stages in life that you become a child.
Mm-hmm. So at some point things clicked in terms of the stages being related to each other in terms of human development?
And that came then as a result of that.
Right. As a sudden insight or a gradual?
That was a gradual thing. Yeah, it was not one point, and the whole thing is that it's often not one insight. Sometimes it is, but I'll tell another example of that. But often it's, you have an idea and then you apply it and then it works and then you get confirmation. And then I start thinking, okay, but when this has that, then the others in the group must have that too, probably. And I extend that, try that too. Again, use it in cases and then look it up in the materia medica and toxicology, what fits and what not and what I can extract. So it's a process of a circular thing of science, generalizations, and experiences.
Right.
Which is the basis of science, anyhow.
Yeah, that's actually very good. Yeah, this is how you do science.
Right. Okay, and what with regard to the stages?
The stages were a bit difficult in the beginning because I remember that one of the crucial aspects was that it was wondering how Platina and Aurum, which were very responsible and strong, and Platina even haughty, how that could be connected to barium, because they are on the same row. But barium is
seemingly opposite.
Completely the opposite. Mm-hmm. And then I suddenly realized, but that's the theme, that it is just the opposite of the same thing of power.
Okay.
And then
this is extremely vague. So the theme of power, you're not going to differentiate between patients mentally by applying the theme of power. You need to have concrete, objective things. You need to pin down mental symptoms to exact information, and this is just vague. And if the remedy didn't fit into your classification, then you're just gonna say, well, it can also be the opposite. So now it fits. And as I said, if you're describing someone using a vague generalization and an abstract idea, it becomes very, very difficult. You know, how do you differentiate between patients? You need to look at all the symptoms of a patient and the unique, peculiar symptoms, being on a scale of wanting power or not wanting power is not gonna differentiate between patients. This is it's too vague. So it's not going to work. I firmly believe that this is never going to work. And if you are using this method with success, then you can comment below this video and disagree with me.
Then I remember that at one moment it was a real insight, going back to that insight, that I got the idea, okay, it's an evolution.
Okay.
It starts with very powerless, very weak possibilities, and then gaining power and strength, and then after that losing it again. And that was a kind of eureka experience.
Okay.
Quite sudden.
Right, and then subsequently you filled out the details of all the stages, and that I presume took a while.
Yeah, that took a year or so to get. Already, once you have the idea, it goes quite fast. But then all the precisions and all the details, that takes more time.
Right. So, having discovered the stages and series, then what do you make of the actual existence of a correspondence between an increasing atomic complexity and some parallel process in human evolution? Because it's quite an astounding discovery and not an obvious one.
Yeah.
So this is crazy. So none of the great homeopathic masters were fans of allegories like that, drawing parallels between how atoms work and people's personality, and this is just insanity. So, you know, you can talk about science all you want, and we agree with that, but this is nonsense. There is no allegory in homeopathy. You have some remedies which carry signatures in terms of the symptoms. You know, like you know, onion remedies, craving onions or something. But that's just, I mean, it's not, you can't build a whole system of thought based on allegories, you know. Yeah, allium sipa people crave onions, but you know, it's like most of the other information is not doesn't work based on signatures. So, you know. Yeah, and lachesis, people kind of behave like they've been bitten by a snake or something, kind of have symptoms like that. But it's like the exception and not the rule that you can apply signatures to remedies and allegories and parallels, metaphors. And going in this direction again is making homeopathy interesting. Trying to make homeopathy is an effort to try to make homeopathy interesting to people who are into New Age, psychoanalytic, you know, allegorical thinking, which is fine. You know, I don't doubt that New Age stuff actually works, but why dilute homeopathy, water down homeopathy with all this crap? You know, why? There is a flawless system of science there, and then you're just throwing it out the window and then creating a system of allegory, and I don't know. It's crazy.
And it started with seeing the development of the themes, you know, when you connect Gold Series to being the leader and carbon series as being the child, then you see already the age difference.
Right.
And then you have the working people, carbon series, not carbon series, iron series, which is adulthood. Then you see gradually the whole age.
The iron series is the carbon series is the adulthood. What a load of nonsense.
Coming through it. And then, of course, the next thing is then you see the symbolism of it. And that's.
We don't see the symbolism of it. We don't see it. Yeah, we want to see provings and symptoms based on provings, which is the real science of homeopathy. Homeopathy is based on provings and not abstract, allegorical daydreaming.
It's a beautiful thing that, you wouldn't expect that in elements would be a reflection of how life is.
Right.
But
it seems to just shine through.
Yeah. And it's probably also that all those themes, they come back in all kinds of different fields on Earth and in the universe. The whole idea is that you have an evolution of something coming into existence, coming to full blossom, and then disappearing again. That's basically how the whole Big Bang is, and it comes back to nothing in the end, I think. But that's every life goes like that. Our life goes like that. The lives of animals, even the lives of stars and suns and planets goes like that. They come into existence and they disappear again in the end.
Right. So definitely a major case of parsimony. Yeah. The idea that the simple single explanation can count for many different phenomena.
Yeah.
You have said in the past that all the elements are projections of possibilities, of talents and problems.
What does that even mean? All the elements are projections of talents and problems. We don't even know what that means.
And my question to you is, how did you come up with your peculiar style of describing materia medica, where you break down the remedy into several themes and then explore all the possible permutations, combinations of the remedy?
That's also a gradual development. Once you have the themes of the series and of the stages, you can make all kinds of combinations. And there are several aspects of them. Sometimes it's a talent aspect, and sometimes it's a failure aspect of an element or a stage or.
What are you even talking about?
A theme. And that's always there. There's always a talent in something, and there's also a failure in something. Even when you look at a baby, you could say it's a failure. The baby can hardly do anything, but he has a very.
Okay, I think that was enough. So being a baby is a failure. We learned a lot today about that, so that's amazing. Yeah, that's it for today, and don't buy into non-classical homeopathy. And if you want to get a classical homeopathic consultation, you can get in touch with me.